Former Deputy National Security Advisor to President Trump, Victoria Coates, is coming up. I will particularly ask her, this is war. Again, how do we negotiate with them? But first, to Chief Foreign Correspondent Trey Yingst on the ground in Tel Aviv, Israel. Trey.
Harris, good morning. A heavy exchange of fire overnight as the Iranians launched more than 24 ballistic missiles at Israel. The Israelis responding with a series of airstrikes across Iran. But today, Iran's IRGC says they have halted attacks against the Jewish state. Take a listen.
As we had promised, we acted accordingly. The powerful armed forces of the Islamic Republic of Iran, including the Islamic Revolutionary Guard groups, and the Army of the Islamic Republic of Iran have demonstrated that, while maintaining the highest level of defensive and offensive readiness, they acted upon their stated commitments with speed and precision and make their American Zionist enemies regret their actions.
This announcement by the Iranians came just minutes after President Trump posted on True Social saying, quote, both sides, Israel and Iran, are looking to do an immediate ceasefire. Final negotiations on peace are proceeding, subject to ignorance or stupidity getting in its way. The blockade will remain in place and in full force and effect until a final deal is reached. Things should move quickly. Thank you for your attention to this matter. The president spoke with Fox News overnight as this Iranian ballistic missile attack was taking place. I asked the president what his message would be for Iran. He said, what I would suggest to Iran, you shot your missiles, that's enough. Get back to the table and make a deal. The president indicated this certainly will make the negotiations more difficult, but again, he is encouraging both sides to reach an agreement. Israeli forces conducting a variety of strikes against the Iranian regime, specifically going after many of the air defense systems on the outskirts of Tehran and on the western side of Iranian territory. The Israelis also struck a petrochemical plant inside of Iran, an indication they are willing to escalate in order to de-escalate. Now, tonight, Harris, the question is whether or not this ceasefire is going to hold. We do expect in about 10 minutes to hear a new announcement from Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. Harris?
All right, that is good to know. We will bring you back as the news warrants on that particular piece of the puzzle. Thank you very much. And focus now, Victoria Coates, former Deputy National Security Advisor to President Trump and Heritage Foundation Vice President of National Security. Great to see you. Look, there is urgency now because this looks like what it did previous to our hitting them. So what is happening that's making this so shaky with Iran hitting Israel now?
Well, Harris, good to see you. Now, I think that you're rightly identifying this as an escalating phase of the conflict. But, you know, in reality, we can say that we've been at war with Iran, or Iran, rather, has been at war with us for 47 years. So it's not entirely surprising. And the really important thing here is that those dozens of ballistic missiles that Trey was reporting on, none of them reached their targets. I don't care what the IRGC general says about how, oh, my gosh, you know, we have forced them to regret their actions. They've done no such thing. They didn't hit anything. And the Israelis, on the other hand, had very successful strikes last night on their missile defenses. And I think that petrochemical plant is very important as well, because that's a really, really significant industry for Iran. If that thing is disabled, they're going to have even more trouble putting themselves back together again in the event a deal is reached.
Who is in charge over there that we're dealing with?
Well, according to President Trump, we are dealing with the new supreme leader, the son of the old one, Mujtaba Khamenei, and he is badly, badly wounded, but is apparently well enough at least to communicate. Although there were some reports overnight that he might have been hit in one of those Israeli strikes, so that would certainly be a plot twist if that is confirmed. So that is one person you can deal with. He might be a little bit less radical than his father or some of the more extreme IRGC generals.
Why would we think he's less radical?
Well, just because, as the president said, he's younger, he may have some sense of self-preservation that he wants to go through. I agree with you, Harris. I mean, this is not a good bunch of people. There aren't very many George Washingtons to be found in the Iranian regime, if any. So we're not looking for that. We're just looking for someone who can make a decision on the nuclear file and then hopefully transition to a much more liberal form of government eventually for Iran.
Look, I know the point is always peace, and the president has been so patient through all of this, trying to get to the negotiating table with something that's real. Our bottom line, though, is that a thirsty, radical, Islamic terror state does not get nuclear weapons, when it fires on Israel and engages its neighbors, when it takes out the international airport in Kuwait, when it does those things with Iran, when that happens, how does that move us any closer to preserving our one singular issue?
Well, that's the thing, is Iran, is now so thoroughly revealed to be, as you say, this terrorist state. And one good thing that's come out of it is really united Iran's neighbors against it and with the United States and Israel.
Yes.
And I think we will see a lot of regional progress being made. Don't forget, the Israelis deployed the Iron Dome, their proprietary, very special missile defense system, to UAE during the war to protect the Emirates with IDF soldiers manning it. If I had told you that 10 years ago, you would have told me I was crazy. But that's what President Trump's leadership has done, along with Iran's malfeasance. So, yes, I do think we need to transition Iran in an orderly fashion into a much more liberal form of government. That's what the Iranian people want. It's what they deserve. There's no way this group can put the economy back together after what's happened to it. But we need someone who can make a decision on the nuclear file to get there.
Well, it can continue to try to give itself relevancy by pushing the can down the road and killing people along the way, including their own people. The Institute for the Study of War posted, quote, Iran will likely seek to use the threat of a resumption of full-scale war to deter additional Israeli attacks. Iran is already attempting to present itself as a reasonable actor in the most recent escalation, even though its ally, Hezbollah, started the escalation yesterday. And, of course, there's more of it today. Look, Victoria, when I look at Hezbollah and the work that this president has ushered into the present, getting Israel and Lebanon, the heads of those two states, to talk to each other, that's because of Trump and the work he's done in the region, and we're clear on that. Hezbollah doesn't care about that, though. And Lebanon's government doesn't control Hezbollah.
No, and that's another extremely important point, is that now Hezbollah is in many ways as isolated as Iran. They don't have a willing partner in the government of Lebanon, which they have had in the past. And perhaps more significantly, Harris, they don't have a supporter in Bashar al-Assad in Damascus and Syria anymore. They have a much more hostile regime that's pretty much dead set against the Iranians and moving closer to the United States and our allies. I'm not saying that's a perfect situation by any stretch of the imagination, but it's a lot better than it was. So if you can have Jerusalem working with Damascus and Beirut against Hezbollah, and remember, the president said yesterday he'll help Israel against Hezbollah if they do this in a more strategic, surgical fashion that won't upset the peace negotiations with Lebanon. The United States will help. We've had them as a designated terrorist group since the 1980s,
yes.
So nothing would make me happier than to see Hezbollah eradicated.
Wow, just hearing you say Beirut and Damascus and Israel all in one sentence, I mean, that is monumental and not to be missed in the conversation. Victoria Coates, always great to have you. Thank you. Be sure to like and subscribe for all the Fox News latest on YouTube, and catch full shows streaming now on Fox One.